Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I am Elise. My husband and I moved from Texas to Vilnius, Lithuania in February. In today's video, I thought I would share more of our planning process moving here and the logistics of how we moved here. So just a couple little disclaimers before we get started. My husband is a dual citizen of America and of Norway, but it's definitely not that difficult to get residency if you don't have that European citizenship. You will be completely fine. And another thing that made it a little bit easier for us to move here is I do have a job that is remote. So I work from home. So we were able to move here and I was able to continue working pretty easily. My husband and I are not rich. We did not save a crazy amount of money before we moved here. Nothing like that. We're just normal people and we just kind of took a leap of faith and decided to move here. The first step is just making the decision to actually do it. So me and my husband have been talking about moving to Europe for years and years. We've been talking about it since we first started dating. It was always just this theory of one day we're gonna move to Europe and one day it's gonna happen. We were living in a city that we honestly we weren't passionate about living there. My husband didn't really like his job that much, and we just kind of thought like, okay, what are we waiting for? We need to just make the decision to just do it. The next thing we needed to do was we needed to kind of start thinking about the timeline of when are we gonna do this? You know, when would it be a good time for my husband to leave his job? How much time do we want to save money? Also, when would be a good time to leave our apartment? First of all, we had talked about, okay, we'll wait till our current apartment lease is over, which was going to be in October 2020, and then we will move then. We just kind of got to the point of we don't want to stay in Dallas for a whole nother year. My husband didn't want to stay in his job for a whole nother year. So we started thinking about, what's the soonest that we can move where we would have enough money and be able to find a cheap flight and when would make the most sense. So we settled on February 2020. We needed to decide on a city to live in. So we had a few cities in mind. We both love Berlin. We had thought about Lisbon. We had thought about a few cities in Spain. We were really open to any city that had kind of the things that we were looking for. This is where I went into full-on research mode. Got my computer here and I'm going to show y'all. I just used Google Sheets, but of course you can use Microsoft Excel if you have that, but why not just use Google Sheets? It's free. I started with a website called nomadlist.com. And so this website just kind of started giving me some ideas of what we were looking for, what kind of cities we could choose from. You can really search for like anything. Of course, I clicked Europe, first of all. Number one, we need it to have an airport. Because, we're moving to Europe. We want to be able to travel. We need to be near a large airport. And then let's see, maybe we want it to be clean. Few tourists. That is one of the things that we looked at when we were looking. A lot of people use Tinder or a lot of people use Grindr in that city. You can say that. You can say tall men, tall women, which, if I click that, I bet Vilnius would pop up. There's a lot of tall people here. Definitely walkable was something that we wanted. I also clicked safe for women, the cost of living. So we wanted a low cost of living. I played around with this website for hours and hours and hours, just clicking different things, unclicking different things. From this website, I took a list of like 20 cities and I put them on the Google document. Then I went to this website, expatistan.com. I compared Dallas, where we lived, and I compared it with whatever city we were looking at. Cost of living in Dallas is 58% more expensive than in Vilnius. So we definitely wanted to live in a city that was going to be cheaper than Dallas. We wanted to move to Europe, and we wanted to save money on cost of living so we would have money to travel. Besides that website, this website is really where I started to get my numerical information about different cities. And we are going to look at cost of living in, let's do Vienna. So I went through and I looked at everything on this, okay? I went through and I looked at the rent, I looked at the cost of a cappuccino, the cost of a sandwich, the cost at a restaurant, just to kind of get an idea. This will give you the cost of living index. So then after that, I also looked at the rent. So we knew that whatever city we lived in, we want to live in the city. We want to live in the middle of town. So then I wrote down the cost of a one-bedroom apartment in the city center. So you can also do crime in Vienna. So the crime index is 23.74. Obviously, those numbers don't mean anything to me, but they're all based on the same index. So I used Numbeo to compare cost of living, one-bedroom apartment, crime index, traffic index. And then I just used Google Flights to search if the city has direct flights to Dallas or not, which Vilnius did not have direct flights to Dallas and the rest of the cities did. Then I compared the cost of the average flight to Oslo using Google Flights, and then to compare the number of tourists. This was a little more complicated and not so exact. So I just kind of looked up what is the average amount of tourists in Vilnius per year, or in Berlin per year, whatever city. And so I just kind of took the number that each country gave, and I just divided that number by the population to get kind of a percentage of, this says Vienna has 821% tourists every year. So there's basically 8 times the population is coming to Vienna every year. So there's a lot of tourists there. In Vilnius, 22%. Quite a bit less than the population is coming to Vilnius every year. So there's not very many tourists here. So after I kind of got all of this information, I did a scale for each one of green, it's the best, yellow, it's okay, red, it's one of the worst ones for that category. You can kind of see looking at this why we chose Vilnius, because Vilnius had all green across the board, cheap, safe, not much traffic, cheap flights to Oslo. Y'all, I feel like that whole explanation got very convoluted, but basically that's how we decided on Vilnius. So I will link those websites down below, but I really just did a ton of research about things that were important to us, and it was just really helpful to me to use a spreadsheet to figure that out. Once we decided, okay, Vilnius is it. Vilnius has everything we want. It's cheap, it's safe, it's easy to travel from. Awesome. Vilnius it is. So next, I watched every YouTube video in Vilnius. I swear I watched every video. We read a ton about Vilnius. We watched a ton of videos. We talked about it. We've never been there before, but we're just gonna do it. This was the big moment. It is time to book a flight. So this was the point where it was okay, once we book this flight, that's it. This is real. We're really doing this. So we got on Google Flights. I found the cheapest day in February to fly on. It was February 2nd. We booked our flight. And that moment was so crazy. After that, we would just look at each other and say, oh my gosh, we're really, really doing this. This is for real. And the next thing we did was very, very fun. It was telling our friends and family. So all of our friends and family knew that we wanted to move to Europe one day. We talked about it all the time with them. We would always say, oh, one day when we live in Europe, blah, blah, blah. Everyone was super happy for us. Everyone was super excited. Everyone was a little bit confused because a lot of people did not know where Vilnius was. A lot of people had never heard of it. And a lot of people did not understand why we chose it. And this was also the point where once our flight was booked, my husband could tell his job when he was officially leaving. Okay, the next step, once we knew when we were going to arrive in Vilnius, we needed a place to stay. So we booked an Airbnb for 1 month. Like I said, we'd never been to Vilnius before. So we wanted to have time to see if we liked it. And if after the month was over, we didn't like it, we would just move on to another city. And if we did like it, it would give us enough time to find an apartment. Finding an apartment and that whole process is pretty easy in Vilnius. And I had looked up, how difficult, how far in advance do you need to book an apartment? And we realized that 1 month in an Airbnb would give us enough time to decide if we liked it and to find an apartment. I know in other cities, like in Berlin, it's like notoriously hard to find an apartment, especially if you're a foreigner. So if you're moving to a city like that, I would almost recommend booking an Airbnb for closer to 3 months, or booking an Airbnb at least for a few weeks to see if you like the city, and then possibly extending your stay in that Airbnb until you find an apartment. So the next thing we did was create a giant to-do list. Me being super planning person, we had 4 full months to do everything we needed to do to get ready for our move. So I said, okay, in the month of October, we need to have these 5 things done. We need to tell your job that we're leaving. We need to tell our apartment complex that we're leaving. And then, January, we need to find a storage unit. We need to book movers. We need to, so on and so on and so on. So I really divided up the to-do list so it was not overwhelming. And it really was not. Compared to like planning a wedding, it was like not that stressful and not that much to do. So really the last thing we did was just getting on the plane. We tried to spend as much time with our family and friends the last week before we left. And we, went and enjoyed our Mexican food our last night in America because we are from Texas. I had to have one more frozen margarita before I left. That is all we did to move to Europe. All the logistical stuff, you can do it. It will fall into place. You will have to spend time researching, but you can do it. The hardest thing was like pushing book on the one-way flight. And I sincerely believe you do not need to be rich. You don't need to be some super adventurous person. You don't need to do it with a partner. You really just need to have the courage to decide to do it if it's what you want to do. It is not as hard to do as people might have you believe. It is overwhelming to make such a big life decision like this, but I really truly believe that if this is something that you want to do, if you want to change your life in this way, you can do it. Like you really can. We're not rich, we're not super courageous, we're not outgoing, we're not, we're not a lot of things. And me and my husband, we decided in September that we were going to do it, and in February we were on the plane, and now we are here in April and we're living life in Europe, and we are so happy we did it. I really hope this video was helpful to you. If you are thinking about moving to Europe, I watched every single video about people moving to Europe on YouTube that I could find. And if you want to see more about our life in Vilnius, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you for watching. Bye. My cat is like dreaming. She's like making really weird noises. I think she's like eating a bird in her sleep or something.